That wonderful line, high on crack, toting a machine gun, comes, of course, from Prince, the Prince of Peace, whom I knew and who played his song against the Iraq War, which I will never forget, directly, personally, to me in a London hotel room. Prince was right, high on crack, toting a machine gun spells disaster. But that's what the United States is currently on. They're on crack, the crack of their own hubris, all the Rambos, seals, penguins, dolphins, all the paraphernalia of United States military worship are all over the internet and all over the head of the people in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump's even traveling with not just Jeffrey Epstein's next-door neighbor, what could possibly be wrong with that, but Lindsey Graham, who has effectively become the number 2 man in foreign policy decisions in the United States of America. They're there with the media egging them on. They are, well, aroused. They are hard, erect at the possibility of whom they're going to attack next. Sometimes it's their NATO and EU ally, Denmark, which would deserve it, right enough, having been the first country to recognize the illegal severance of the Serbian territory of Kosovo. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they were the first people, first cab off the rank to recognize the completely illegal breaking up of somebody else's country. Well, karma has a way of coming back to you, doesn't it? That's why it's called karma. The Danish are now in a state of weak-kneed palsy, a palsy which is, of course, informed by the fact that if Donald Trump decides to land his Marines on Greenland, the European Union, NATO, and of course Denmark, will do jack shit about it. It's a truism that if you have voluntarily gotten onto your knees, if you have voluntarily made yourself supine, then the master will do what he pleases with you. And that's the situation, that's the contradiction that the European members of NATO are now in. They wreck their own economies for the United States. President Joe Biden, they wrecked their own societies at the demands of the globalized capitalist system. They have destroyed the morale of their own people, such that the possibility of European citizens joining up for an army that is dedicated to fight Russia are now close to zero. We launched Sign the Pledge, a no conscription pledge in Britain, and we can't keep up with the number of people who are signing it. My own son was the first one. He's going to fight for the Viet Cong instead. Nobody's going to fight for Keir Starmer. Nobody's going to fight for Merz. Nobody is going to fight for Macron, especially as on this very weekend, Keir Starmer reached the record historic low of 11% approval in the public opinion poll. So a guy with 11% of public support is sailing the United Kingdom into existential danger. A danger made more severe by Britain's collaboration, complicity, not just in sundry war crimes, in territory, in Ukraine, inside Russia, but from British bases in the last few hours on the North Atlantic coast. The idea that Britain and the United States of America could launch a military action against a Russian tanker lawfully present in the North Atlantic, lawfully carrying Venezuelan crude, which it is legally, perfectly entitled to do, the fact that Britain and the United States, deliberately because they threw the air assets into England in order to use England as the launch pad for this attack on the Russian tanker Marinera, having tried and failed to board it in the Caribbean. Just in the last hours, they have gotten it in the North Atlantic. But that is only the end of the beginning, because the extraterritoriality of the United States demand that they police any and all tankers. Might work if it's a Liberian tanker, it might work if it's a Danish tanker, but it sure won't work if it is a Russian and Chinese tanker. And now 14 Russian and Chinese tankers are either on their way to or in Venezuelan ports, as they are perfectly entitled to do. It is an astonishing thing for me that so many people imagine that the United States has the right to lawfully sanction people. It doesn't. It can sanction its own companies, its own citizens. It can forbid its own companies and its own citizens from trading with a third party, but it has no right whatsoever to try and extend their sanctions to other countries, especially when they're permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations and when they are nuclear-armed superpowers. In fact, it's a sign of madness, and madness is abroad. I have never seen an outflow of, as I said, drunken hubris, of chest beating, of Tarzan behavior exhibited all over the mass media, including now social media, given that Zuckerberg and Musk and all the others are fully on board, having been themselves terrorized by Donald Trump. I have never seen anything like it. It's like the victory of the Taliban just a couple of years ago never happened. That's right. If you've forgotten that, it's like the United States stealing like a thief in the night out of Bagram with the sandal-wearing, Kalashnikov-bearing Taliban ragged-arsed fighters in close pursuit. It's like the defeat after 20 years of occupation in Afghanistan never happened. They are drunk on what they perceive to be the highly successful military raid in Caracas, to which I turn in just a minute. And as for the epic victory of the Vietnamese people, well, of course, that's ancient history for them. But it isn't, you know. There are many people watching this show who remember the Vietnam era only too well. There are even people watching this show who had to risk dying face down in a paddy field in Southeast Asia in order to fulfill the demands of the United States governments of Lyndon B. Johnson, followed by Richard M. Nixon. There are people watching this show now who remember the horrors of a war that cost the United States 58,000 dead service personnel, hundreds of thousands of wounded, maimed, and damaged survivors. And of course, they remember the post-Vietnam era, where more Vietnam vets committed suicide even than were killed in the action itself. But they've forgotten all about that. The fact that they were able to kill 100 people in Caracas, apparently, according to them, without reply. They killed 34 Cuban special forces, including 5 Cuban generals, without sustaining a single casualty. I'm already on record as saying that is literally an impossibility. I know the Cuban armed forces. I know the top brass of the Cuban military. There isn't any way they're going down dead without firing a meaningful shot in reply. But that's what Trump has claimed. So either Trump is lying about the casualty rate of the United States forces that attacked Caracas, or these Cubans and the other Venezuelan military personnel who were not killed by the SEALs, by the special operations, by the Delta Force, as has been variously claimed. They were not. They can only have been in other circumstances, had their lives cold-bloodedly taken away from them. It's one or the other. Either Trump's lying about the casualties on the United States side, or all these people were murdered in cold blood by somebody. And Anya Parampil, a great expert on Venezuela, might be able to help us with that. She's our first guest this evening, an acclaimed author on the subject of Venezuela, of course. But back to the events, let's call them that. The events of, 72 hours or so ago, when the United States captured, in their words, kidnapped, in mine, the legitimate, recognized president of Venezuela. This is an important set of words. The recognized, legitimate president of a sovereign state, one of the most important states in the global south, with the world's largest oil reserves, a man who gives speeches at the United Nations, a man who has state-to-state relations with 120 or 30 countries around the world. This was not some rogue leader that the United States kidnapped. And not only did they kidnap him, they kidnapped his 70-year-old wife, and they have severely injured her. They have broken her ribs. They have damaged her face and head, so that she appeared in a New York courtroom with bandages around her head and strapping around her ribs. And the first action of the legal team of Nicolas Maduro was to appeal to the judge for proper medical treatment for a 70-year-old woman who has been taken entirely illegally without even the pretense of a legal basis for doing so. Mrs. Maduro ain't no narco-terrorist. Mrs. Maduro ain't holding any machine guns. Mrs. Maduro has committed no crime, so why is she injured in a New York penitentiary? These questions will be asked with increasing virulence and increasing regularity over the next few days. If I were their legal team, I would be moving a court action now for her immediate release on the basis that there's no evidence of any wrongdoing on her part, and that even if there was, the United States does not have the jurisdiction to attack with massive military force a capital in a foreign country and seize its head of state and its first lady. These are ABC principles which I'm finding it necessary to start teaching people about again. You see, we've grown so accustomed to the extraterritoriality, to the American exceptionalism of US imperialism, that even by default, even without knowing it, we begin to internalize a belief that they have the right to do this. And of course, they do not. Maduro's like a king. He's like a lion surrounded by hyenas. He is taller than everybody who is seizing him. He has more self-respect. He has more dignity, more bearing, more machismo than any of the pygmies that have seized him, including Donald Trump. Trump's rhetoric, has become so unhinged that there must be somewhere in the United States government an increasing anxiety that this man has gone completely loco. He said last night that Maduro, and I'm quoting Donald Trump, had killed millions of people. He killed millions of people. It's just not in the indictment that the United States has prepared for him. What millions? Where? How? When did Maduro kill millions of people? He said that Maduro had a torture chamber in the center of Caracas. It's just not in the indictment. We've kidnapped him, but we're not going to charge him with killing millions of people. We're not going to charge him with having a torture chamber in the center of Caracas, which he then claimed was being closed down. He is pretending. Maybe he's not pretending. Our guest tonight will shed light on that he is running Venezuela through the acting president, Kelsey Rodriguez, a long-time Chavista, a long-time assistant president, vice president, and comrade of Nicolas Maduro. Trump is deliberately seeking to convey the impression that the Venezuelans have agreed to stump up 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude oil, give it to the United States, who will keep the money and use it to the best effect. I don't know if that's true. Don't know how it could be true. Don't know who could have made such a decision. But in closing down the torture chamber, the non-existent torture chamber that nobody's ever mentioned before, Trump is deliberately giving the impression that he is running Venezuela by Zoom, I guess. I mean, a Zoom call a day to the Miraflores, giving orders to the still extant Chavista Venezuelan regime. It doesn't sound likely to me, but definitely something funny is going on. That much is clear, and we'll try to get to the bottom of it. I have no idea how long I've been speaking. I don't have a clock, so I'm just going to keep speaking because the situation now is that an international crisis has erupted in the North Sea. In the North Sea, off the coast of Great Britain. Keir Starmer, Mr. 11%, has been gagging for war with Russia. Well, he's just about to get it, and I hope the British people are ready for what comes next. If you think that Vladimir Putin is going to allow the pygmy Keir Starmer to steal a Russian oil tanker in the North Sea, you've got another thing coming. If you think the Russians are going to allow the camel to stick its nose under the tent as a prelude to being in the tent itself, you are a fool. You are drunk on the hubris abroad in Washington. It's the mother of all talk shows. I'll be right back with Anya Parampil. Stay tuned.